Summer here at South Hills, from a staff perspective, is the time that we take to kind of really evaluate every aspect of church life for us. And we wanted to let you guys know kind of something we've been working on that is going to continue to get fleshed out over the summer, not by just our campus, but every campus of South Hills. And it's really called our growth track. And what it is it kind of maps out all the places and spaces you can go to grow in your faith. And it literally is a track. And part of the design of a track is we believe that there's never a point where we arrive. When it comes to our faith, there's never a point where we hit a point. It's like, God, I know it all. I've done it all, and I'm good. And so this track is like this infinite loop that we never stop running as long as we're following Jesus. We're gonna find ourselves somewhere on this track. And so what you see behind me are all the different places and spaces where you can grow in your faith. And they're color coded. And don't ask me the colors because I literally can't tell you what they are. Not kidding, not exaggerating. I asked if they could do numbers, but then they made that graphic and I didn't like it. So I just said, stick with the colors and I'll be okay. But the color of the lane is connected to one of our core values. And so you'll start to see this in our building. You'll start to see this in different places. We wanted to give you a roadmap of how do I grow spiritually here at South Hills? Where are the places that I go? The other side of this is you may say, well, what if I've done all of those things? Well, the next thing for you to do is to run that track with somebody else. That's how we continue to grow. Right? And so if you have any questions as you see it, man, our team would love to answer those questions. But we want to put it out in front of you, especially as we kick off this series that I think kind of sets up exactly what we've been working on and what we're going to continue to work on over the summer. And so we all know those people who are always talking about doing something. They're saying, you know what, I'm gonna go back to school this year, or I'm gonna get in shape this year. I'm gonna eat healthier this year. How many of you said you're gonna eat healthier, get in shape this year? You can raise your hand. How many of you still doing it? Don't raise your hand. You don't have to do that. There's no judgment, right? But we all know those people, and maybe we are those people who say, you know what, this year is gonna be the year that I finally slow down and take a break. And they talk about it all the time, but they never actually do it. And there's always a reason, right? Life is just crazy right now. Work is too much right now. The kids are too much right now. And you know, I tried, but. And you cheer them on like the good friend you are, or the good family member that you are. And you say, you know what, just do it. But the answer is always the same for them. I would, but. And let's be honest. We've all got a but. Not the one behind us, but the one that's in front of us and maybe standing in between the life that you truly desire to live. We've all got buts. We say things like, I would, but I'm too busy. I would, but I'm scared. I would, but I don't know how. My 3-year-old son, his favorite but right now, yeah, I know, a 3-year-old has a butt, yes. And his favorite butt right now is like when we get home and maybe we went grocery shopping or whatever it is and we got all these bags and he has stuff, we need him to help us like, hey, just carry your stuff, the things that belong to you, right? And so, you know, usually he'll get out of the car and he has 2 cars in his hands. He always has cars with him. And then we're just asking, hey, Zion, could you just grab your water? That's your water that you drink, that none of us drink. You drink. Just grab your water. That would help us a lot. And he looks at us and he goes, but I got too much stuff. And all he's holding is 2 cars. That's his favorite but right now. And excuses, reasons. Sometimes they're just stories we tell ourselves to avoid what's real. Life coach Hattie Willoughby, she says it great when she says this. And I want you to hear what she says with love, because I think some of you are going to hear this and maybe it's going to hit you a little bit this morning, but this is what she says. She says, you've mastered potential, but you refuse to master commitment. You say you want luxury, but your effort is giving clearance rack. Woo. You romanticize the future, but you date your bad habits like they're your soulmate. You ask for clarity, but you ignore it every time it just shows up as hard work. You want better, but you keep walking back to average like it's your childhood home. You're not tired from chasing your dreams. You're tired from running in circles around the same excuses. You want the freedom that comes with discipline, but you treat structure like it's punishment. You made a vision board for a life your habits are actively rejecting. Now, here's what I know. I know that change is hard. I know that risk is scary. I know that growth, any sort of growth, is uncomfortable. But what if that but you keep blaming isn't the thing that's holding you back? What if it's just the story that's keeping you stuck? And so over the month of June, we're gonna unpack the 5 biggest buts that get in the way of who you wanna be and maybe even who you're meant to be. And if your brain just whispered to you, but this isn't gonna help me, but this isn't gonna work for me, it's already happening. You see how easy it is for one little but to keep us right where we are. If you're taking notes, the title of our message for week 1 is, But I Can Do It on My Own. But I can do it on my own. Have any of you ever overestimated your fitness ability at the gym before and completely embarrassed yourself? Right? I remember being in high school and our summer workout program for our baseball team, we were in the gym every day. And part of our routine was to do box jumps. And I hated box jumps because I always thought they were terrifying, to be honest. And one year we shifted from actual wooden boxes to these like black metal, like almost pyramid type things with just a small rubber square on the top, and it had like a really rough edge. And I don't know why we made that switch, because at least with the box, you had a lot more real estate to work with and land on. And so I remember there was a day where we had four of those little pyramid things, and all at different heights. And our coach never pushed us. He said, hey, I want you to do what you feel comfortable with and kind of get through the workout. And each time through, each rep, you're just gonna go to the next box and stop when you feel like you can't do it. And of course, as high school kids, you're pushing each other. You're telling each other, oh, you can do that. I bet you can't do that. All those things. And so peer pressure sets in. And so I'm telling myself, I got through the first 3 boxes easily. And you get to that 4th one, and it comes up to like your belly button. And your mind you're trying to tell yourself, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. But your mind is at the same time telling your body, there's no way you can do this. And we're not talking about, there's no running start. We're talking right in front of it. You just got to spring yourself up and get on it. And so I'm seeing my friends do it, and everyone's doing it, and they're getting hype, like that gym hype, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And so the peer pressure increases, and so I get through the first 3, and on the 4th rep, I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting at the 3rd one. I'm like, let me just do this. Let me just be safe and be wise. And then, you hear all the noise, and it's like, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And you mentally prepare, and you're hyping yourself up, and then you go to jump, and you forget that your mind was still telling your body, there's no way that you're doing it. And so I jump, and literally, my feet didn't even touch the edge, but my shins caught the edge all the way down. And so here's what happens, right? What happens when something doesn't go the way we thought it would, we try to explain it, right? We tell ourselves, we create these stories to try to explain what happened. So I'm on the ground, my shins are bleeding, and this is the story I'm telling myself. Oh, I think my knee is done, which is why I couldn't get up there, right? We do that, right? Maybe for you were at the gym and you saw a lady, if you're a guy, you saw a lady lift more than you. Right? Maybe you were playing basketball and there was an old guy on the court who just schooled you, right? And the story that you tell yourself is, well, she must be on steroids. Right? Or my shoulder hurts. Or, I just had an off day. That old guy on the court, he was cheating, right? That's what we tell ourselves, right? And why do we do that? Because we live in a culture that worships success and self-sufficiency. Now, success is not bad. Self-sufficiency isn't necessarily a bad thing, but let's be real, we kind of value at an unhealthy level doing things all on our own. No questions, no directions, no help. We tell ourselves, I got this, I can do it myself, I'll figure it out. But we've all seen someone struggling, refusing help, and it hurts to watch, especially when it's clear that things are falling apart. And when things do go well, we're tempted to believe it was all us, that it was our brilliance, that it was our hustle, that it was our grit. But let's be honest, no one makes it alone. And even then, we do the same thing with God. acting like we've got it handled when we don't. Have you ever noticed, if you're taking notes, you can write this down, we take the credit in the highs and hand God the blame in the lows? We love to take the credit when things are going well, and we love to hand God the blame when things are falling apart. We experienced this yesterday in one of the funniest ways. I don't know if usually Rick comes to the 10 o'clock service, but Rick gave our family tickets to go to Disneyland. And so we took Zion yesterday and we rode Autopia, which is the worst ride ever created. If you've ever been on it, you know why it's terrible, especially if you have a 3-year-old driving your car. You're just jerking back and forth, right? So we get on this ride, and you want to talk about just the human nature of self-sufficiency that's in us. I'm controlling the gas pedal because his feet can't even touch it, and I'm trying to keep us like somewhat on that middle thing, so like in the middle, so we're not going back and forth and jerking, but he's like, no, let me drive. I can do it. And he loves cars, so this is for him. It's like, I'm finally driving a car, right? And so the whole time, we're literally just going back and forth, jerking. And at one point, he got jerked really hard. He got jerked so hard to the right that it knocked him off the steering wheel, knocked his hands off the steering wheel. Here's the best part. He tries to grab the steering wheel again, and as soon as he reaches for the steering wheel, we hit the middle thing again and get jerked to the left. So you see this video of him. I have it on video. It's the funniest thing ever. He literally goes, and then he grabs and he's like, and then he looks at me and he's like, and I'm like, yeah, if you would just let me help you. But we want to do things on our own. And if you're like me, you might not blame God, but you definitely beg him for help, right? When things aren't going well, that's when we turn to God and we say, please, God, help my son. Please, God, I need this promotion. And then once things get better, you go right back to ignoring them. We all do it. Even if you're unsure what you believe, when life gets messy, you pray. I have friends who do not believe in Jesus, and when things are getting rocky in their life, I get a text message, hey, would you pray for this? And in my head, I'm like, you don't believe. So even if I were to pray, and I do pray, like you don't believe in the God that I'm praying to. So where does this come from? And so even people who don't believe, when life gets messy, they say, would you pray for me just in case? But once things settle, so does our faith. And here's the real question. Do you really believe in God, or is he just an emergency contact that you have when things fall apart? Do you actually believe in God, or is he just an emergency contact that you have when things fall apart? This isn't new, it's human nature. In fact, there's a story about a king in the Old Testament who did the exact same thing, and we pick up his story, 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 3a. This is what it says. It says, Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. Yes, he was only 16. And so some of you are thinking, if you have had teenagers, spent time with teenagers, you're thinking, yeah, he's got to be probably one of the most arrogant kings to rule over Jerusalem, simply because he's a teenager, right? What teenager doesn't think they know it all or think they could run a country, right? But that's what makes Uzziah different. He actually started with humility. Jump to verses 4 and 5. It says this: he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his father Amaziah had done. Uzziah sought God during the days of Zechariah, who taught him to fear God. And as long as the king sought guidance from the Lord, God gave him success. Notice that as long as he was willing to recognize that he could not lead on his own, but that he needed God's wisdom, he needed God's guidance, God gave him success. And so Uzziah surrounded himself with the right people, listened to godly authority, sought God's wisdom, and he aimed to do what was right. And you might be thinking, that's great, but how do we even know what's right? Sometimes it's clear, but let's be honest, life is messy, life is loud. But here's the simple answer the Bible gives us over and over and over again. If you're taking notes, you write this down. What God says is always the right thing. What God says is always the right thing. It's not really about how we feel. It's not really about what we think. It's not really about what we want. It's really about what God says. And when our way clashes with his way wins. And that's where things usually get tricky for us. God says this is right, that's wrong, this is good, stay away from that. But it often pushes against our opinions, our desires. And so we start looking for loopholes. We start making excuses and convincing ourselves that we know better. But the Bible constantly draws these lines between people. You got people who do what's right in their eyes, and you got people who do what's right in God's eyes. And every king in Chronicles falls into one of these two camps. Uzziah, he started as one of the good ones. Not because he was successful, but because he relied on God. His success came from walking with God in God's ways, but then things took a turn. Look at what verse 15b says. It says, his fame spread far and wide, for he was greatly helped until he became powerful. And so wait, God helped him succeed. Now he's stopping. Once he got there, was God threatened? Was God playing games? No, this wasn't a shift in God. It was a shift in Uzziah, but because we blame God in the lows, it feels and sounds like there was a shift in God. But see, God won't force his help on us. If we think we've got it, guess what? God will let you try. He's always willing to let us test our own way. Look at what Romans 1:24 says this. So God abandoned them. He didn't abandon them as people, but he abandoned them to do whatever it was they want to do. He abandoned to do whatever shameful things their hearts desired. As a result, they did vile and degrading things with each other's bodies. Now, one of the scariest things about God is that he gives us what we want, even when it's not good for us. Most of us won't admit, though, our desires are destructive until we're handed the chance to wreck ourselves, which we know wasn't a good idea to begin with. And so everyone else, when it comes to Uzziah, saw it coming. And unfortunately, Uzziah was like most of us. 2 Chronicles 26:16a, it says this, but after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. Pride comes before the fall. We know that. But what we often miss is what comes before pride. And what comes before pride are power and success. And I would even say you could add to what comes before pride is power, success, and trust. Because in order to get power, someone has to trust you with it. And so what comes before pride is power, success, and trust. And those things trick us into thinking that we don't need help. But while we might fool ourselves, no one else is buying it. When we start believing we're the reason for our own success, we feel untouchable. And that's when we start pushing limits, bending rules, justifying anything. And we've all seen it, and most of us have lived it. And one of the sobering lessons from Uzziah's life and story is, and if you're taking notes, here's our big idea today. Success often does more damage to your soul than struggle. Success often does more damage to your soul than struggle. Uzziah was most vulnerable not when he was weak, but when he was strong. Uzziah was most vulnerable not when he wasn't king, but when he was. His success and strength became his undoing. Look at what verses 16b through 19a say. It says, he was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah the priest with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord followed him in. They confronted King Uzziah and said, it is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord God. Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand, ready to burn incense, became angry. And so as king, once the pride set in, Uzziah felt like he could do anything. Uzziah looked at every situation in his life, even with 80 godly men in front of him, telling him, hey, you know you can't do this, that what you're getting ready to do is reserved solely for the priests. But because the pride had set in, again, he thought he was the exception. He thought he was invincible. And that's what pride does. Think about this. If wise, godly people challenge you and you explode in anger, maybe that's an opportunity for you to take a step back. See, Uzziah had changed. He stopped listening. He stopped submitting. He stopped seeking God. He stopped doing the things that gave him success in the first place. His humility was gone, and so was his way. And incredibly, God still shows him mercy. Look what verses 19b through 20, it says this: while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy broke out on his forehead. When Azariah, the chief priest, and all the other priests looked at him, they saw that he had leprosy on his forehead, so they hurried him out. And indeed, he himself was eager to leave because the Lord had afflicted him. You might be thinking, wait, didn't you just say God showed him mercy and you just read that he had leprosy? That doesn't sound merciful. That sounds pretty harsh. But you got to understand that in the Old Testament, everyone was living under the law. And so Uzziah's penalty really was death. But God had mercy on him and gave him leprosy. The leprosy was God's mercy. Now, here's the truth that we don't really want to hear. Take notes, you can write this down. Grace doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it looks like consequences that finally wake us up. Grace doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it looks like consequences that finally wake us up. Uzziah didn't stop because he knew what was wrong. He stopped when he saw the cost. And often we ask, well, why did God let this happen? Maybe it's God showing us that we're not self-sufficient, that we cannot do this life the way he desires us to do it on our own. For many of us, what we say is, oh, it's just the devil attacking me, when maybe it's actually God trying to grab your attention. We all have things we avoid because they're hard or humbling, whether it be therapy, community, coaching, apologizing. And I wonder, what is your butt costing you? What excuses are pride feeding? Uzziah's story shows that pride doesn't just make you act badly, it catches up to you. And the deeper truth of this story, if we're taking notes, you can write this down, is if you're walking in pride, don't be surprised if God isn't walking with you. If you are walking in pride, don't be surprised when God isn't walking with you. The principle of that isn't just from this Old Testament story, but we see it in the New Testament as well. It's echoed in the New Testament. James 4:6, it says this: and he gives grace generously. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And pride isn't just arrogance, it's making yourself the ultimate authority. It's believing that I know better than God. But God, who deeply loves you, is willing to oppose you when you're off track. And the beautiful truth, the moment we humble ourselves, he pours out his grace, he pours out his blessings far beyond anything we can imagine. And when we trust him and follow his way, guess what he does? He gives us grace and he gives us mercy and he blesses us even when it doesn't make sense. And here are the questions we have to wrestle with today. Where has pride snuck into your life? Where have you stopped seeking God's help? What did you once pray over, but now you just do it your way? Where do you think you've got it all figured out and get defensive when you're questioned? And if you don't like your answers, how do you humble yourself and avoid the same downfall as Uzziah? You start at the beginning. You submit to God. And you submit to his ways. And you surround yourself with God-centered people. You submit to leaders that God has placed in your life. You seek God's wisdom daily. And you ultimately do everything that you can to live the way that he desires you to live. Put simply, you aim to do what Jesus would do if he were in your shoes. It's not easy because what that means is it means dying to yourself every single day. But I believe if we start there, it'll change everything. There's this simple yet profound invitation that God makes to us in the Psalms. Psalm 46, verse 10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world." And in ancient times, God's people heard these words regularly in temple worship, because temple worship was just the Psalms. They were scheduled to remind them, be still and know that he is God, not me. Because the temptation is to always think the opposite. The good news is that God invites you to know him before you even need him. You don't have to wait for your life to fall apart. You can start right now. And so here's the simple challenge I want to invite us all into this week. If you're taking notes, you write this down. Take a moment every morning this week to acknowledge your need for God. Take a moment every morning this week to acknowledge your need for God. It's okay to ask him for stuff, but take time to be still and just to recognize and know that he is God and he's good. Don't ask him for success. Just seek his heart, seek his wisdom, seek his perspective on your life. And if you are in the room or you're joining us online and you're like, where do I even start? I don't even know where to start. Maybe you're in the room and you're like, I've never prayed before, so I don't even know what to say. I want to give you something that you can pray every single morning this week. And this is the prayer. God, I need you today. I can't do this on my own. Give me strength where I feel weak, peace where I feel anxious, and hope when I feel unsure. Thank you for being near even when I don't always see it. Help me trust you one step at a time. What if you prayed that every morning this week? What if you started your day and you said, you know what, God, the place that I want to start before I do anything is to say, God, I cannot move forward in the rest of this day without you. I need you. What would that look like? And some of you are like, I don't believe, but I don't think that's gonna change anything for me. You're letting your butt get in the way. And what do you have to lose by trying? What if the only thing holding you back is the story that you're telling yourself? When all God's asking you to do is say, hey, you don't have to do it on your own. In fact, I want to do it with you. Think about this. The God who puts the stars in the sky, the God who calls the sun to rise every single day, is a God who says, I want you to need me. Think about that. He's looking at you and he's saying, I want you to need me. Like nothing's gonna change that. Every single day, I want you to desperately need me so that we can do this life together.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.